My fiancé's former wife exploded onto my doorstep like a scene from a twisted melodrama, brandishing accusations of a scandal I'd long kept secret and determined to sabotage our wedding day. Yet instead of trembling, I couldn't help but laugh in her smug, defiant eyes. I, a 28-year-old woman heady with anticipation, had been engaged to Terry, a 30-year-old whose warm smile belied a complicated past, for 8 whirlwind months. We'd tied the knot just a week ago, though our celebration was marred by the sudden reappearance of Terry's past love just as our vows were about to be exchanged. Terry, who'd once shared his life with Eliza, his high school sweetheart, had endured a stormy 3-year union with her before fate drove them apart. Their breakup had been as bitter as it was inevitable. Eliza, desperate to trade the corporate grind for a domestic haven, had pushed for divorce when Terry's earnings proved insufficient to support both her dreams and the mounting arguments that tore at their fragile home. In that tempest, Terry found himself doing it all, mending broken dishes, scrubbing every surface, and quietly patching up wounds after each quarrel, while Eliza simply returned to her work and then lamented that I, Terry, was forcing her to labor away at a job she once loathed. Even when he proposed moving to a cozier apartment to save a few pennies so she could finally abandon the office, her pride would not let her adjust. I still shudder to think how anyone could endure such relentless discord for 3 long years before finally calling it quits. Their split, 6 years past, had left Terry unreachable to her, blocked on every channel, his number changed, his friends sworn to silence. And yet, like a persistent ghost, she'd tried every trick, fake social media profiles, anonymous emails landing in his spam, to bridge the distance she'd been denied. But Terry, resolute and unyielding, had left her to her own bitter devices. And just when I thought his past was fully laid to rest, fate had another twist in store. 3 years ago, Terry met me through his cousin, an encounter sparked by a shared table at a family gathering that quickly revealed our spark. He was irresistibly funny, cute, and charming, yet haunted by history. He insisted on taking things slow, ensuring every heartbeat was carefully measured before diving into a full-blown romance. I honored his caution, and over time, our tentative courtship blossomed into the deep, unwavering love that now had us happily married, if not for that one surreal moment at our wedding, a moment that would later haunt my nights and fuel this wild tale. It was a cool, ordinary day about 2 weeks ago when Terry had already left for work and I opted to work from home, planning a later trip across town for final wedding details. The doorbell's chime shattered the calm, and when I swung the door open, there she was, Eliza, unmistakable from the grainy photos I'd seen of her with Terry, her smirk as sharp as broken glass. For a breathless moment, time froze. With a self-assured tilt of her head, she leaned in close and asked, in a voice dripping with insinuation, if my name was Courtney. When I confirmed, she whispered that she knew my dirty little secret. I stared, utterly dumbfounded, until she clarified, naming a man named Sam, whom I dated briefly on a dating app just weeks before meeting Terry. Sam, a fleeting distraction whose lackluster date had ended in my ghosting him, was now apparently the scandal at the center of her vendetta. I had dismissed that brief dalliance as nothing more than a trivial misadventure. After all, it wasn't the heartbreak of a long-term affair but a single, boring date that I had casually ended. I never imagined that mention of Sam, who, admittedly, Terry vaguely knew I'd been seeing, would be weaponized by Eliza as some treacherous secret. As she let slip that Sam had become a close friend of hers, and claimed she discovered I was juggling Terry and this lackluster suitor simultaneously, she threatened to expose everything to Terry and upend our wedding. The sheer melodrama of it all sent me into peals of incredulous laughter, a laugh so out of place in that charged moment that it visibly vexed her. With her eyes darkening in fury, she hissed that if I didn't confess and cancel the wedding, Terry would be the one to hear it from her. I had had enough. I barked at her to leave, slamming the door in her face as she stalked away into the drizzle of an otherwise ordinary day. But even as her footsteps faded, I decided not to disturb Terry with the memory of her visit, convinced that her threat would dissolve like a bad dream until the day of the wedding. The ceremony had been a tender procession of tears and whispered vows until, mid-aisle, a piercing screech shattered the reverie. All eyes turned as Eliza reappeared, clutching the hand of a bewildered little boy as if he were a trophy. In that electrifying moment, she declared that our union was invalid. The child she now claimed as the son Terry had fathered, nurtured single-handedly for 6 years, was proof that he still belonged to her. The shock was palpable. Terry's face turned a ghastly shade, and the air grew thick with disbelief. I knew instinctively that I had to take control of the chaos before it swallowed us whole. Her story, riddled with glaring inconsistencies, unraveled under the weight of common sense. If she had indeed been raising his child, why had she never sought his support? How could she, once content as a housewife-to-be, suddenly morph into an ambitious, independent single mother overnight, abandoning her long-sought alimony in a heartbeat once pregnancy struck? I could only think of it as a dramatic fabrication, a desperate bid to derail Terry's fresh start. I boldly declared that her claims were nothing more than lies, insisting that a paternity test would expose her deception. In response, she spat that I should mind my own business, a laughable retort to echo in the midst of my wedding. When she shoved past me to reach the stage, a surge of anger ignited in me. I reacted without thought, grabbing her and delivering 2 resounding slaps. The pandemonium escalated as a guest whisked away the inconspicuous boy, and though she lunged to retaliate, others intervened, restraining her while Terry whisked me away from the unfolding calamity. We ended up marrying in the modest backyard of our home, a small, intimate setting that had once promised serenity. As Terry carried me inside amidst the discord, I felt a curious gratitude that only a sparse audience bore witness to my public outburst. Once in the safe haven of our house, Terry soothed my red-cheeked fury for several minutes while I muttered vengeful thoughts about giving Eliza another piece of my mind. Soon after, my parents arrived, and Terry ventured out to quell the storm outside. After 20 minutes filled with heated shouts and tearful silences, Terry returned, his eyes stormy with hurt. The remaining guests gathered for a brief respite before we resumed our vows, a decision born of defiance, a refusal to let Eliza win by canceling our celebration. Our words exchanged at the altar now resonated more deeply than ever, a testament to our love and unyielding trust forged in the crucible of that chaotic day. But as our hearts promised forever, the question loomed, how would the fallout continue to echo in our lives? Only 2 days later, whispers began to swirl. A friend of Terry's admitted, hesitantly and with remorse, that it was he who had unwittingly let Eliza know about our impending nuptials. His confession, wrapped in apologies, did little to soothe the sting of betrayal. Apparently, even as recently as that moment, Eliza had been murmuring to her circle that Terry was her destined love, a notion that her friend felt compelled to shatter by informing her of our marriage. In our minds, it was clear, nothing from Terry's past would be allowed to seep into our future. We had already severed ties, drawing an impenetrable line between our new life and her venomous interference. I had considered calling the police, but Terry, weary of drama, urged me to let sleeping dogs lie. Still, the matter of my single, fleeting date with Sam, which turned out to be a twist of fate, remained unresolved. You see, Sam, as fate would have it, was revealed to be Eliza's third cousin, a connection uncovered at a distant family gathering. One gloomy afternoon, as Eliza confided her despair about losing the love of her life to someone else, she showed Sam a photo of Terry and me, a snapshot that ignited a chain of events. Sam, who had known of our union through lingering Facebook ties and had even once dropped me home after our first date, admitted that he'd passed along my address to her. He'd underestimated the tempest she would unleash that fateful day. He later apologized via a text, lamenting that the little boy she had paraded around was not her charge at all but a relative's child, a fact that had forced her to expose the entire sordid affair to her family. And so, through Sam's guilty confession, I learned the full extent of her schemes. Yet the true heartache lay in the timing. Sam's text arrived only yesterday, while Terry and I had already embarked on our honeymoon, a trip meant for bliss but now shadowed by his seething anger over my decision to withhold the details of Eliza's first visit. He believed that had I told him immediately, we might have avoided the wedding fiasco altogether. I tried to explain that my intent had always been to shield him from negativity, to protect the fragile happiness we'd so carefully built. But as we argued last night, Terry insisted that honesty should have triumphed over my attempts at protection. Though I agreed in part, I couldn't shoulder all the blame. After all, it had been his friend who first mentioned the wedding to Eliza, setting off this chain reaction. Perhaps if that conversation had never happened, the entire scandal would have evaporated into silence. We reconciled before bed, yet an undercurrent of distance lingered, a reminder that our perfect day had been tarnished by deceit and miscommunication. The sting of Eliza's disruption was not so easily washed away, and I feared that even our honeymoon might soon fall prey to her lingering shadow. But as the evening beckoned, Terry's mood shifted. We planned a spontaneous night at the beach, to drink, dance, and let the crashing waves drown out the echoes of scandal. Could this fleeting escape salvage our fragile joy? Shortly after our return from the honeymoon, we made a startling decision. We would have another ceremony, a private, family-only celebration to reaffirm our love, far from the prying eyes of those who traded in our privacy for gossip. Terry and I, both fiercely protective of our intimacy, realized that if our so-called friends reveled more in scandal than in our happiness, they weren't worth having around at all. With our parents' wholehearted support, and even an offer to help fund this second, more intimate union, we set our minds to redoing our wedding. This time, our vows would be shared only with those who truly mattered, ensuring that memories would be steeped in genuine love rather than the bitter taste of betrayal. And so we wondered, could a new beginning mend the fractures left behind by the chaos of that fateful day? Then, almost as if scripted by fate itself, we went through with our second wedding. In this fresh chapter, the only witnesses were our families and my dearest childhood friend, practically a sibling in spirit. Terry and I were radiant in our newfound joy, eager to embrace the promise of our future as a married couple. Meanwhile, news arrived that Eliza, along with her mother, had relocated to Brooklyn to live with her father, who'd been working there. Forced by her mother's insistence, Eliza had been uprooted for reasons beyond her control. Not long after, she sent Terry an email dripping with regret and accusations, insisting that he had wronged her and that fate had destined them for each other. The absurdity of it all left me with nothing but a weary resolve to ignore her, a resolve that became final when Terry and I decided, unequivocally, that nothing from her past would ever infiltrate our lives again. Even as I reflect on the cascading events, friends betraying confidences, family ties twisting into unexpected connections, and a once dormant scandal reawakened by a misdirected text, I remain determined. We're cutting Eliza out for good, sealing our future with our own vows and the quiet assurance that our love will speak louder than any gossip. The storm may have passed, but its echoes remind us that every life has its dramas. And so, as Terry and I settle into our renewed celebration of love, I can't help but wonder, in the grand tapestry of our lives, what other unexpected threads will weave their way into our story?